I'm here to talk about the USCT who just briefly came through Prince William County. And I want to start out with this man. That's Sergeant Nimrod Burke. A lot of people didn't realize who it was, but I've met some of his descendants, and they were actually from Prince William County. His family, the Burke family, was freed by Robert Carter III, one of the wealthiest men in Virginia at the time, and he freed his whole family. He freed about 500 of his enslaved people. Now, Nimrod stayed here until he was about 18 years old, and then they moved to Ohio. Now, at the outbreak of the Civil War, Nimrod tried to enlist in the Army, and he was denied because he was an African American. However, he had worked for an abolitionist lawyer, Melvin Clark, and Clark was appointed major in the Union Army and raised the companies in the 36th Ohio. And he hired Nimrod to be a teamster and a scout. Now, Nimrod stayed with that regiment until March of 1864. And he went to Washington as the group was near Washington, and then he enlisted in the 23rd United States Colored Troops. When he enlisted, they knew about his experience. He's been with the 36th Ohio since the beginning of the war, and he'd even been through some big battles like Antietam, for one. And he was educated, so he was quickly promoted to sergeant. Now, in this picture, this is probably a subtler picture because many of the soldiers took pictures, and it has corporal stripes on it, and he has a revolver, and corporals don't have revolvers. We have muskets. Now, First Sergeant Burke was a soldier in the 23rd, which was a regiment of the 4th Division of the Independent 9th Army Corps. And this division of African-American soldiers is going to be here around the 1st of May, and they bivouacked in Manassas Junction. And they stayed here till about May 4th, and then they were going to be ordered to march to Warrenton. And during those few days, they were ordered to drill and shoot. And when the 23rd USCT came into Prince William County, Nimrod was home. Now, a lot of people know this man because of his distinctive whiskers. That's General Ambrose E. Burnside. Now, I know him a lot because we talk about him all the time at Fredericksburg, because he was the commander of the Army of Potomac during the Battle of Fredericksburg. But when he leaves there, he goes out to the west, and he is going to command the Army of the Ohio, and he's going to win a victory against General Longstreet at the Battle of Knoxville. But then he's going to come back to the area looking for another command, and he's going to be asked by Secretary of War Edwin Stanton to reconstitute the 9th Corps. And if he does so, and he works with the Army of the Potomac, he can't be part of the Army of the Potomac because he outranks General George Gordon Meade. So the 9th Corps would have to be an independent Army Corps. Now, when this happens, this is going to be pretty awkward for General Ulysses S. Grant, because whenever he wants the two armies to work together, he's going to have to issue two sets of orders, and these armies are not run the same. But also, Burnside is going to ask to have a division of colored troops. And according to his biographer, this was an important evolution in his attitude toward black recruiting, because we never knew that Burnside would even consider having black troops. But thus, Stanton is going to say that there is no difficulty assigning a black division once the individual regiments are complete. And when that happens, the 4th Division of the 9th Corps is going to be formed. Now, when the 4th Division left Camp Stanton in Annapolis, Maryland, they were paraded in front of President Abraham Lincoln and General Burnside in Washington, D.C. The 23rd is going to join the 4th Division once they cross over the bridge into Virginia as the 23rd was at Camp Casey, Virginia. Now, General Burnside and General Meade. General Meade is commanding the Army of the Potomac right now, but I don't think he really trusts General Burnside too much. And it's going to play out later on in the war. But General Meade led the only really successful assault at the Battle of Fredericksburg when he takes Prospect Hill from General Stonewall Jackson's troops just for a brief time because he doesn't have enough reinforcements. And part of that reason is because General Burnside's orders are not clear enough to give him the support that he needs. And plus, the troops on the other side, the other flank of Burnside's army, they're going to be kind of slaughtered over at Marie's Heights. So I don't think Meade really trusts the leadership ability of General Burnside. This man is General Edward Ferrero. Now, General Ferrero was a dance instructor by trade, but he was also a lieutenant colonel in the New York militia. And he mustered into service as colonel of the 51st New York Infantry. And he led a brigade of the 9th Corps at 2nd Manassas, Antietam, and Fredericksburg. And he was promoted to brigadier general on September 10, 1862. However, his appointment lapsed until May 6, 1863, because the Senate did not confirm it earlier. He commanded a division when the 9th Corps was part of the Army of the Ohio with General Burnside in Tennessee. And he was given the division of black troops in 1864. So he's going to command these black troops, and these soldiers hailed from various areas of the North and a couple of southern states. The 4th Division, they're going to be made up in 2 brigades. Colonel Joshua K. Siegfried is going to lead the 1st Brigade. Colonel Henry G. Thomas is going to lead the 2nd Brigade. Now, as you can see, these men are from all over. 27th is from Camp Delaware, Ohio. The 30th is from Camp Stanton in Maryland. The 39th is from Baltimore, Maryland. 43rd is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the 19th is also from Camp Stanton. 23rd, Camp Casey, Virginia. 31st is from Hart's Island, New York. And the 30th Connecticut Colored is actually from Fairhaven, Connecticut. And the additions in June were going to be the 28th USCT from Indianapolis and the 29th from Quincy, Illinois. So these men had varied backgrounds. Some were escaped slaves. Some men had been freemen. Some men had lived in the South. Some had lived in the North, in areas where they were allowed to live. And some had even come from Canada. Because of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, many of those who had escaped slavery moved to Canada. And then they're going to come back to help African Americans gain freedom during the Civil War. But they're going to be very new to the Army of the Potomac. And they're going to be the talk of that army because they had never seen black troops before. Although there had been black regiments since 1862, then they were just surprised to see that the U.S. government was going to send these raw colored troops to fight against the vaunted Army of Northern Virginia, led by Robert E. Lee. So the sight of these black men proved that the transformation of the Army, that the war had changed, and now these men were going to step up and fight against some of the very men who had enslaved them. Okay, I'm going to talk about the division as it served in with the Army of the Potomac. The division was sent to Manassas and arrived here by train about May 1st, and General Burnside orders General Ferrero to practice them at target and drill. These men had never been in a military campaign, and there was a worry that they could not march the distances that they needed to be effective in the campaign. And from May 2nd until May 4th, the division is marching and exercises, and they're marching through Prince William to go to Warrenton Junction. On May 5th, General Ferrero wants to rest his men, since they marched over 30 miles in 24 hours. However, as soon as General Burnside hears about the fighting at the Wilderness, the 4th Division is ordered to move immediately. And by May 6th, these soldiers actually get to Germanna Ford, and they're ordered to report to General John Sedgwick of the 6th Corps. They're going to become the extreme right of the Union Army at that point. 2 of the regiments are going to be guarding the fort, and the rest are going to be deployed to the right of the 6th Corps. And after the 6th Corps is broken by General John B. Gordon's flank attack, they were ordered to double quick to the sound of the guns. Lieutenant Freeman Bowley wrote about the 30th USCT going to the sounds of battle on May 6th. Then says they were almost at the scene when fire slackened and they were halted. So before they get to the front, the sound ebbs and the attack is over before they could see action. And these men really wanted to prove that they could fight, so they really wanted to get into the action. But after the attack is over, they're going to be assigned to guard wagon trains. So from May 7th until the end of the battle at Spotsylvania Courthouse, the 4th Division will guard the wagon trains, and they're all along what is now Route 3, and they go all the way to Belle Plaine in Stafford County, Virginia. On May 12th, they are going to be escorting Confederate prisoners to the rear, because May 12th was the day of the Battle of the Muleshoe and the Bloody Angle. And there were over 3,000 Confederates captured at the Muleshoe. During the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, the 23rd Regiment was at Chancellorsville guarding wagon trains when on May 15, 1864, the 2nd Ohio is going to ask for assistance. They were being attacked by General Thomas Rosser's Confederate cavalry. General Ferrero marched the 23rd at the double quick to the intersection of what is now Catharpin and Old Plank Road. They formed a battle line and fired on the Confederate Army and drove them away. They become the first African-American soldiers to fight in directed combat against the Army of Northern Virginia. They were cheered by the white soldiers of the 2nd Ohio. Now they knew that these black soldiers would fight against the Confederates. And at this time, some of those men in the 23rd had been escaped slaves from Spotsylvania, Stafford, Culpeper, Orange, and Caroline County, so they were fighting against some of the people who had enslaved them. Lieutenant Robert Beecham of the 23rd USCT stated that they were at Belle Plaine Landing, which was the base of supplies for the Union Army. They loaded provisions and ammunition and returned rapidly to Grant's army. The day of our return, he says, we met and repulsed the first cavalry attack made on our train in our vicinity. The Confederate cavalry came on in some bridle path through the woods that was guarded only by a small detachment of Union cavalry, which the Confederates drove before them, and they were within 300 yards of our train when the 23rd arrived on the ground. After double-quicking a half-mile in order to reach it, we hustled those Johnnies out of there in good shape, only losing a few men wounded. From that date until its arrival in front of Petersburg, the duty of guarding our trains against raiding detachments of Confederate cavalry was assigned to Ferrero's 4th Division. And I have yet to learn of a single instance where the Confederates caught us napping. Now, General Ferrero is going to report about this. And from his headquarters, he says, General, I have the honor to report that at 12:30 p.m. this day, the 2nd Ohio Cavalry, stationed at Piney Branch Church, were compelled to fall back, being attacked by superior forces, consisting of 1 brigade of cavalry and 2 pieces of artillery. I immediately ordered the 4th Division in readiness and marched the 23rd U.S. Colored Troops to support the cavalry. On arriving at Ulrich's on the Plank Road, I found the 2nd Ohio driven across the road and the enemy occupying the crossroads. I ordered the colored regiment to advance on the enemy in line of battle, which they did, and drove the enemy in perfect rout. Not being able to pursue with infantry, the 2nd Ohio formed and gave chase to Piney Branch Church, which they, the 2nd Ohio, now occupy. All quiet elsewhere. Our loss amounted to 8 or 10 wounded. The enemy lost some 5 horses killed. I have changed my position to a more secure one to protect the trains and roads leading to the army. I have since learned from one of my scouts that Hampton's brigade is in full retreat, in perfect disorder, toward Todd's Tavern. Very respectfully yours, Edward Ferrero. Then on May 19th, there's going to be another skirmish. This time is going to include the entire 4th Division. And this division covered a large area around Spotsylvania Courthouse. Lieutenant Bowley's 30th USCT were in the Salem Church area outside of Fredericksburg and on the left of the Spotsylvania battlefield. They doubled quick to the sounds of guns, and Bowley fired an infield musket at a cavalry officer, but he missed. The soldiers kept firing and drove the Confederates back. They stayed on the line all of the night. And General Ferrero again reports this. And this he does on May 20th for the fight on May 19th. He says, "Sir, I have the honor to report that I was attacked by a strong force of cavalry and artillery at 5 p.m. last evening. At the same time, heard heavy firing on my left rear. The enemy were defeated in their attempt to break through my lines. Captured several prisoners belonging to Ewell's Corps. I have given instructions for all trains proceeding to the front to take Massaponax Church Road. I would suggest that my lines be drawn back closer to Fredericksburg as my left is too open and I have not the troops to cover the extent of the country intervening between Salem Church and Massaponax Road. I await orders with reference to this change. I would add that we are constantly menaced by the enemy, both in small and large parties. The amount of cavalry that I have, being about 700 men, is insufficient to do the duty. Respectfully, your obedient servant, Edward Ferrero." Both of these reports are found in the official records of the War of the Rebellion. But on May 24th, the day before the Battle of the North Anna River, General Grant is going to make a decision. The independent 9th Army Corps and the Army of the Potomac have not worked very well together. So he is going to place General Burnside under the command of General Meade. Now, General Burnside, is really a slight, but he says that General Grant should have done this a long time ago. So now the 9th Corps is fighting under the Army of the Potomac. Now, the first major action of the 4th Division was during the siege of Petersburg on July 30th, 1864, at the famous Battle of the Crater. That's an event that the 23rd and the 54th Mass has done several times since the sesquicentennial. Now, General Burnside had granted coal miners of the 48th Pennsylvania to dig a tunnel under the Confederate lines in one of these little forts that they had there. Now, the black troops had been practicing their movements to take place after the explosion is going to occur. They had the feeling that if they proved successful in this event, that they could take Petersburg and thus end the war. So they were very confident that they could do this job. However, on the Thursday before the Saturday attack, General Meade goes to General Burnside and tells him that he cannot use the Black Division. Burnside is going to argue with him. He says the Black Division is the freshest division that he has, and they have not been used to trench warfare. He says that his white units, as soon as they see the big trench that's going to be left from the explosion, they would go right into the trench and start trying to fight there. Whereas the black troops were trained to go around the big explosion and go straight into Petersburg. Well, Meade still is going to say no. But the Friday, he doesn't come to Burnside, so Burnside thinks that he's changed his mind and is going to let Burnside use his black troops. But later that evening, when Meade is getting ready to move his tent and get closer to the line, General Meade comes up and tells Burnside, you cannot use the black troops. Now, when Burnside gets a little distracted, he's going to do something that's not going to be very good. Now, what he does is he has his 3 white commanders for his other 3 divisions pick straws to see who is going to lead the attack. And who gets the smallest straw? General James Ledlie. Now, Ledlie was accused of being drunk at the Battle of North Anna River. And when he gets this assignment, he's just going to tell his troops that you're going to hear a loud explosion and go to that crater. And that's all he tells them. And when the explosion is going to occur, Ledlie is going to be in charge. Now, Ledlie orders his men to attack after the crater. Now, the bomb explosion was supposed to be earlier, but it's going to be delayed. The fuse burns out, and they're going to have to go back and relight the fuse. And when it goes off, Ledlie's division is going to stand in awe of what has happened. They're going to see bodies coming down. They're going to see all kinds of equipment coming down. They even help some of the wounded. But the whole purpose of the explosion was for them to go quickly because the Confederates would be confused at that time. And they wait. And then when they do go, they have their pioneers dig part of the trenches to face the enemy. And the 1st Division goes right into the trenches. 2nd Division goes right into the trenches. And you must say, like the trenches, if you look at the trenches at Spotsylvania, when they first really started trench warfare, they were about 6 feet deep. And around Cold Harbor, they're about 6 feet deep. In Petersburg, they're going to be even deeper. Well, this crater has a trench that's 30 feet deep. So how are you going to fight trench warfare when the crater is so big? The 3rd Division, though, when they go out to the sides, and they start taking over some of the other earthworks there. And then finally, they're going to use the U.S. colored troops. They go around the crater. They get further than any group, but then by the time they get into the action, all the Confederates are coming back to make a counterattack. And when they see colored troops, they have blood in their eyes, and they're going to just go hard at those soldiers. But what they do, which was pretty smart, was they kill and wound most of the officers. And then when they press upon them, those black soldiers are going to run back. They're going to run into the crater because as Mahone's men come in, they just keep all of the soldiers around that crater. So you're going to have to make a decision. Either you're going to stay in the crater and get captured or killed, or you're going to try to make a run for it, even though you might be shot or may be hit by a cannonball. A lot of the soldiers leave, but there are going to be soldiers in that crater, and many of them are going to be captured. Now, the colored soldiers, when they surrender, some of them are executed right on the spot. Others, they are taken prisoners, and some of those prisoners are going to make it back. Other ones are going to be killed in line. Now, one guy in the 23rd is going to be, I don't know if I can call him lucky or not, he's going to survive the crater, but when they take him prisoner, his former owner is there. And they immediately give him to the owner, and he sells him south to North Carolina. But it's going to be good because he's going to escape again, and when the Union Army is at Wilmington, he comes in, and then he's going to be safe, and then he's going to move to Washington, D.C. So Peter Churchwell is going to be lucky in a way, but then he has to go back to slavery for a short time before he's going to be free again. But another man in the 23rd, Abraham Tuckson, is not going to be so lucky. Now, when he escapes to freedom in Fredericksburg, and that time is going to be Good Friday, April 18th, 1862. It's when the Union Army first occupies Fredericksburg. Over 10,000 enslaved people will escape from the Fredericksburg area. And many of those men are going to come back as members of the U.S. colored troops. Well, this Mr. Tuckson, he actually lived in Fredericksburg, right on Fall Hill Avenue. But he goes there, he wants to get his family back. And the former slave owner tells him, no, I will shoot you first. And then he says, well, I'm in the Army now. And he wants to come back. And they're going to go to the federal authorities, and they're going to deny Mr. Tuckson the right to go back and see his family. So he is going to be killed at the Battle of the Crater, so he'll never see his family again. Another guy, Andrew Weaver, on the 23rd, he escaped during that same time, but he is actually going to be wounded, and he is going to be safe, and he's going to go back to Washington, D.C. He and Peter Churchwell are going to be friends for the rest of their lives. But a promising plan was going to be changed because Meade went to Grant and said that you shouldn't use those black troops. Now, Burnside, after they argued, he thought that Meade was going to fairly represent his point of view. And Meade never gives Grant Burnside's point of view. And Burnside doesn't fight very well after that. And they were telling him to retreat, and he said no, he wanted to keep attacking. And he wanted the 5th Corps to attack. Maybe if the 5th Corps did attack, they could have won that battle, but Meade is not going to allow the 5th Corps to attack. So the crater is going to end up a lopsided victory for the Confederate Army. In December, the 4th Division is going to join 2 other divisions that were already in the Army of the James. And these black divisions are going to form the 25th Corps. It's going to be the largest grouping of U.S. colored troops during the entire Civil War. Now, Benjamin Butler is a general, so when I talked about troops being formed in 1862 in Louisiana, General Butler was the one who formed them. Now, it's really ironic because at the very beginning of the war, when the Union troops were going through Baltimore, Butler was the one saying to the Baltimore mayor that if any of your slaves escape, we will get them back for you. But now, after 1862 in New Orleans, when he has the Louisiana Native Guard, he has 3 regiments of the Louisiana Native Guard in 1862, he starts to like black troops. So he has 2 divisions already in the Army of the James, and he had already approached General Meade about taking the 4th Division even before the Battle of the Crater. Now, General Butler does not have his black soldiers just guarding wagon trains. He lets them fight. And some of those soldiers in those 2 other brigades, they fight at the Battle of New Market Heights. And 16 of them will win Medals of Honor. 2 of their white officers and 14 of those soldiers will win Medals of Honor fighting at New Market Heights. So Butler really wants these soldiers. Now, when they get those soldiers coming back, this is after the crater, so they're going to give them some light duty, which is not really too light because they're going to be under constant fire, but they're going to be at the Bermuda 100. And when they're there, they were supposed to build a canal there, but Confederates kind of blocked that. And so when the 4th Division gets there, they're now the 3rd Division of the 1st Division of the 25th Corps. So they are going to be on that duty where they're watching that, what was left of the canal, and they'll be firing back at the enemy. They're going to do this until late March, and then in early April, they will have minor roles in the Battle of Hatcher's Run and the fall of Petersburg. And they're going to be in the Petersburg area when Richmond and Petersburg are going to fall on April 2nd. Now, part of the 25th Corps is going to be in Richmond, and they're going to be some of the first troops in Richmond. But then both parts of the 25th Corps are going to be going after Robert E. Lee's army when they start moving toward Appomattox. But then they're going to take even another part of the 25th Corps, and they're going to send them to the battles of Fort Fisher and Wilmington. Now, for the 23rd, they're going to be in the pursuit of Robert E. Lee's army. Some of them will be in Appomattox, but most of the regiment will be sent back to Petersburg. After the war, they're going to be briefly part of the Department of Virginia, where they're going to have colored troops in the area of a lot of the old white slaveholders. They're going to protest having colored troops there. And then the 25th Corps is going to be sent away. They're going to be sent away to the Department of Texas with General Philip Sheridan. Sheridan is going to have an army of 50,000 soldiers, which includes the 25th Corps, and they're going to be guarding Texas because the French have taken over Mexico. And they think the French are going to try to attack Texas because the United States is fighting a civil war. But now that the war is over, they're going to send Sheridan there. When the French see that they have a large army there, the Mexicans are then going to overthrow the French, and there's going to be nothing more for the army to do but just stand guard. Now, the 23rd is actually going to be mustered out November 30th of 1865. But some of those troops are going to stay in Texas until 1867. And when they do that, some of those men are going to stay out and become Buffalo soldiers. But how do we remember these soldiers that were in the 4th Division of the 9th Corps? Well, May 17, 2014 was a very important day for the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park. That was the day when we reopened the renovated Chancellorsville Battlefield Visitor Center. And one of the exhibits was for the 23rd U.S. Colored Troops. So, at the grand reopening at 9 o'clock, they're going to have some of us go and take pictures right next to the exhibit. But the rest of the day is going to be devoted to the 23rd. We're going to have a big program at Fairview section of the Chancellorsville Battlefield. And at that point, we're going to have Voice of America there. So they did a news report from that area. And then they show us going off into just disappearing. So we just go off the battlefield, and the way they make the camera shot is that we just disappear in the clouds of smoke. So it was really neat. It's about a 4-minute video they have on the Voice of America site. And then we had a program right at the spot where the 23rd actually fought. It used to be the site of the Ulrich Farm. It is now the Heflin Farm. And the Heflin family allowed us to set up a big tent out there and let us have a program there. So we had 2 speakers. One, the guy who plays General Grant, Larry Clowers, and we really wanted him there because when we did our first really big event, when we opened the Museum of the Confederacy as Grant's honor guard, that General Grant, Mr. Clowers, said he wanted us to remain there. We were only supposed to be there for the opening, but he wanted us there for the honor guard for the surrender ceremonies. So we used to see him up at the Remembrance Day parades at Gettysburg, so we thought it was only fitting that he should come down and be one of the keynote speakers. The other keynote speaker was Dr. James Bryant. Now, Dr. Bryant used to be a park ranger at the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park. He wrote a lot of the African-American information there during the Civil War times. And he was one of the first ones to research the 23rd. So he's an honorary member of the 23rd, but he's also now writing the regimental history of the 23rd, and we get him to meet with as many of the descendants of soldiers in the 23rd as we can. But at this picture, you'll see me and John Cummings, the officer with the beard. I've known John for a long time, and Dan knows John too. We were the ones who co-founded the 23rd. And that quick story was we were out at the Spotsylvania Courthouse battlefield at the Bloody Angle. I had just finished a tour out there, And John was measuring the trenches for a book, and the park allows him to take pictures of all parts of the battlefield. So we were out there talking. He says, well, the 23rd 150th anniversary is coming up, so we should make a 23rd USCT. And in January, we did start the 23rd. And I asked him a question right there. I said, did you think that when we started the 23rd in January 2011, that we would have all of these people there? Because we had a lot of community support there. We actually walked from the Chancellorsville battlefield down to the spot of their attack. And John said he always expected it. Now, I was surprised at the amount of people there, but he said he always expected it. So, with that, we had a marker there too. But now, this was the Freedom Foundation. This was in November of 2021. You know, during the time that the Union Army was fighting at the Battle of the Wilderness in Spotsylvania, some of the USCT were still guarding Germanna Ford. 3 of them were captured, and they were executed by the Confederate Army, and we do have a monument there now. The monument is surrounded by 3 other exhibits. One is, again, dedicated to those 3 soldiers who were executed. One is to the Madden family. They call that part of Culpeper, Maddensville. And the Maddens were a free African-American family that owned Madden's Tavern. And both armies had come through and gotten food and everything at Madden's Tavern. So the Madden family were really instrumental in helping us get this information out and get the monument and the markers. Also, Ebenezer Baptist Church. It's on their land, and part of the land is owned by a farmer next to them, and he allowed them to do that. So that was last year. So those are 2 markers or memorials to the 4th Division. And there I'm standing with some of the descendants of Sergeant Daniel Stewart. And of course I had them talk to Dr. Bryant, and they're the Dorsey family. Now we still think they could be related to another USCT, a Dorsey who was in the 43rd USCT, but they do know that they're a direct line from Sergeant Daniel Stewart of the 23rd. And this was just recently in February. The Freedom Foundation again got another marker, and this is for the U.S. colored troops in the Overland Campaign. So that campaign is going to start when those guys leave Manassas and go all the way down to the Wilderness and Spotsylvania. So we were out there as honor guard, and that's one of the descendants of the 27th USCT right there. So now, before I close, let me speak about the U.S. colored troops and how they come into existence. Since the beginning of the Civil War, African Americans were not allowed in the Army. But this slide represents information that's taken from the African American Civil War Memorial and Museum in Washington, D.C. Now, all of our units, like the 23rd, the 54th Mass, the 1st USCT, all of us really call that museum our home, and it's being renovated, so it should be reopening pretty soon again, much larger than it was. And the museum now sits right across the street from the memorial there. Now, there's a statue and then a memorial plaque. It's a large plaque because it has the names of all 209,145 soldiers that made up the USCT. So it's 201,000 African-American soldiers. Now, some of those soldiers may have transferred from one regiment to another, like one of Frederick Douglass's sons. One son was in, well, 2 sons were in the 54th Mass, then one son left the 54th Mass and enlisted in the 55th Mass. So his name is listed twice, so there could be some others listed twice. But they have 201,000 names all verified through the Library of Congress. There were 7,000 white officers and 1,145 Hispanic soldiers. Now, the USCT fought in approximately 450 battle engagements, and they were 10% of the Union Army at the end of the war. Now, the Navy had between 20,000 and 29,000 African-American sailors. However, the Navy was never segregated, and that's because ships were too small to segregate. In fact, in both the Confederate and Union navies, they were not segregated. Now, they suffered about 38,000 to 43,000 deaths. As the number of killed in the Civil War grows, it's now 750,000. When I first came to the park, it was 625,000. Then in 2009, it was changed to 750,000. So at first they thought it was 38,000 deaths, and now they say it could be 43,000. And 2/3 of the black soldiers die of disease just like the white soldiers. As I stated earlier, that there were black regiments in 1862, and the reason why you had those, like I said, General Butler had the Louisiana Native Guard. Senator and General James Lane of Kansas had the 1st Black Kansas, and they were the first black soldiers to fight against the Confederacy. They fought in 1862 in October. But the reason why they're going to be there, and also the Secretary of War designates that South Carolina could have 1 regiment of U.S. colored troops in 1862. So those are the 3 states that had the first black regiments. But they were able to be established because on July 17, 1862, the second confiscation and militia acts were approved and subsequently signed by President Lincoln. And these acts allowed as many persons of African descent as necessary to be employed to help suppress the rebellion and use them in such a manner as he may judge best for public welfare. To some, this meant they could be used as soldiers, and Butler and Lane took advantage of it. On September 22nd, President Abraham Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, September 22nd, 1862. And it says the proclamation will take effect January 1, 1863. Well, the emancipation does not free all of the slaves. It only frees slaves in southern states still in rebellion against the United States. And it does not cover the southern states like the border states that were in Union hands and some of the places like New Orleans and South Carolina where the Union Army already has control. Now, the actual emancipation, signed January 1st, 1863, is also going to allow freed slaves and other African-American men to become part of the United States Army. Now, there's the actual order creating the Bureau of Colored Troops, and that was General Order number 143. It was issued May 22nd, 1863, and by the end of the war, there were 166 regiments of infantry, cavalry, heavy and light artillery, and engineers. And they constituted 1/10 of the Army at that point. And these troops helped bolster the Union Army because a lot of white soldiers that by this time were not enlisting in the numbers that they had been before. Now, most regiments of the colored troops were very disciplined and fought as well as white regiments with similar leadership. So that meant those that had good generals fought very well. Those that had bad officers didn't fight well. And I said at New Market Heights, they won 16 Medals of Honor. And after this battle, General Benjamin Butler, who commanded the Army in that battle, he's going to issue his black soldiers the Butler Medal. Now, he actually paid for this medal. He went to Tiffany's and paid for this medal with his own money. He said he never forgot the bravery of his black troops. And I close with this quote from General Butler. He appeared before Congress after the war advocating the passage of a bill giving civil rights to the Negro race. He gave an eyewitness account of the fighting at New Market Heights and then said of the dead, "I looked on their bronze faces, upturned in the shining sun, as if in mute appeal against the wrongs of the country for which they had given their lives, and whose flag had only been to them a flag of stripes on which no star of glory had ever shone for them. Fearing I had wronged them in the past, and believing what was the future of my country to them, among my dead comrades there, I swore to myself a solemn oath. May my right hand forget its cunning, and my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, if I ever fail to defend the rights of those men who have given their blood for me and my country this day and for their race forever. And God helping me, I will keep that oath. Thank you. Okay, if there's some questions, I can take that. Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about how they recruit these troops? It looks like they're coming from so many different areas. How are they forming them into divisions and units and things like that?
Okay, some will be because of bounties, just like they pay white troops. But in the African-American community, you had some of its biggest leaders, like Frederick Douglass, John Mercer Langston. They're all going out recruiting blacks for the Army. And the black soldiers actually wanted to be in the Army at the beginning of the war, because even those black soldiers, those black abolitionists, and even the white abolitionists knew that the war was over slavery. So they wanted to be able to say that they fought for their own freedom. But as far as the governors in those states, they have a mandate. They have to get so many soldiers, and they will get those soldiers by, they have a lot of posters and everything about soldiers or black soldiers wanted for the Army. But also, you had a lot of slaves going into the camps. And in order for some of the women and children to stay, those men were impressed in the Army. So everybody, all the black soldiers didn't get into the Army because they wanted to enlist. Some of them had to enlist. And some of them used different kinds of ways to make them enlist. But for the most part, most of the soldiers actually enlisted because they wanted to.
I have a book called Buffalo Soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's about cavalry.
Cavalry and infantry.
Right.
Yeah.
And there, when somebody did something extraordinary about it, they got the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only medal they gave then, wasn't it?
Oh no, you still have different medals, but Medal of Honor is the highest medal you can get.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it seemed to me that that was the only one anybody ever got.
That's the one they talked about the most. Yeah. Well, because that's the supreme medal that you can get.
Right.
Yeah.
It is now, but I thought maybe.
Or usually it was back then too.
Okay.
But see, in the Civil War, a lot of Medals of Honors were given because people captured enemy flags and things like that. So later on, they were going to try to take some of those medals back, but people didn't give them back. So. And there was one woman, and she was in the Fredericksburg area, Dr. Mary Walker. She was the only woman given a Medal of Honor, and because of all of her work with the injured and wounded soldiers. And they tried to take hers back, but she didn't give it up.
I think I've read their story.
Yeah, but the Buffalo Soldiers come after the U.S. colored troops. And a lot of the U.S. colored troops out in Texas, they will become Buffalo Soldiers, but after the war, a lot of people went out west, and black and white. And the Buffalo Soldiers at first were 4 units. They were 2 cavalry units, the 9th and 10th, and then the 24th and 25th Infantries. And they carried on through, I think through Korea. Because I know when I was in D.C., when one of the Buffalo Soldiers died, I mean, we were saying it's not the Buffalo Soldiers from the West, it was a Buffalo Soldier from the Korean War. Yes?
You mentioned, just to kind of do back up what she was saying, you mentioned a medal at the end that was designed.
The Butler Medal.
What did that look like?
It was a gold medal. I used to have a picture of it. I can get you a picture of it because I still have one. But yeah, it was a gold medal, and it was from Tiffany's. And I think it was a soldier on the front, and I forgot what was on the back. But in one case, I actually saw one in one of the museums. So
there's still, a few of them still survive.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, Butler did it. He paid for it himself, too, so. But it was really special for, I mean, after New Market Heights, it really seemed like it changed his heart. But, I mean, even before then, when he was in Louisiana, that's when it really started. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.